and welcome to another in the series, Why I Write. My name is 𝗪𝗪 Oliver, and I'm your host for these series of conversations where we get the wonderful opportunity to sit down with an artist, a creative individual, and we get the opportunity to learn the behind the scenes experience in terms of what goes on in their creative minds and what inspires them to go through to the production end of their creative mind, whether they be artists or if they are stage producers, if they're actors, if they're comedians, if they're book writers. And we do have another such person with us today in the person of Keisha-Gaye Anderson. And Keisha has penned 3 critically acclaimed books, and it's of poetry and such the like. We're gonna have that wonderful conversation with Keisha tonight in order that we get to learn more about what goes into writing, what goes into the experience of enjoying the creative process, what inspires, what keeps us going, what makes us not let procrastination or imposter syndrome keep us from producing that art that we have been blessed to share. We want to say good evening and welcome to you, Keisha-Gaye. How are you doing tonight?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
I am fantastic. I am so happy that you're able to be with us on an evening when we're all catching up with our hours here in the United States.
I know.
Recalibrating and helping our bodies just to fall in line with the change that, is a normal part of life. Change. We always have to be going through change. How has your Monday been?
My Monday's been busy but productive as usual. I'm juggling a lot, as a parent and a professional and an artist, so it's, we just have to pace ourselves.
All right. Woosah, we're going to take a deep breath.
That's important. Yeah.
As we move into this conversation, Keisha-Gaye, this conversation is so important. It's so critical because as the years unfold, what I have come to realize is that we do have a responsibility, those of us who have the skill and the craft and the insight, to leave behind a legacy in terms of our writings, because we ourselves have benefited so much from writers who have gone before us across the board, and especially writers of color, writers of the Caribbean and Jamaican diaspora, the African diaspora, because as we discuss in today's experiences, whose history and whose stories are we writing? What are we communicating within ourselves, with each other, internationally, interculturally? So when we have a person like you, Keisha-Gaye, who comes to the table to write, we are honored to have you produce your work through to the end. So let's start at the beginning. You have the fantastic, enviable position of being of Jamaican parentage.
That's right. I would, if I had to be born 100 more times, I would still touch down in Jamaica. I always say that.
So did you grow up in Jamaica, or is it that you started in Jamaica and you ended up elsewhere?
Yeah, I was born in Jamaica in Kingston, and my first house was in Ellison Flats, but my parents left when I was 3. So no, I didn't grow up in Jamaica, but I have to tell you, at that time, we lived in Brooklyn and then Queens. And as you know, the way New York is, ethnic neighborhoods are, wherever you land, you're going to be around other Caribbean people. And so everybody around me was from mostly Jamaica, but other islands. So, all of my friends were like first generation, or they were born somewhere else, and we came together. So, I didn't miss anything culturally. It was just a little different experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's an enviable position to be in, where you have the experience growing up from a little girl throughout the years in an environment that, yes, is in another land from your birthland, but definitely having the experience of being around other Caribbean people. And every Caribbean person, I know sometimes they want to mix us up, that we're from this country as opposed to the other country. We don't call our islands islands. We call our islands countries.
You're right.
That's big thinking right there. So the benefit of getting firsthand the differences, the uniqueness of various cultures, plus that impacted you while you grew up in New York, Queens, Brooklyn, etc. So how would you say that began to stir up your creative brain, your creative mind?
Well, I think, coming from where we come from, there's obviously a very rich oral tradition. And so my dad was always telling stories. Everybody in my, they just told these really hilarious stories. And that was just our way of expressing ourselves. So, when I started discovering, we all start, I think, because of Western hegemonic systems. We're going to start with either British literature or American literature or something, right? And it's all good. This is a good introduction. But then I started to discover writers from our part of the, our Caribbean region. And it's I can do this. There, there's a way to talk about, and now that I've found these things, and African-American literature, of course, because it's a similar kind of storytelling, obviously, we're connected. I'm like, okay, here's a way of doing this,
I wanted to know, as you mentioned, meeting Caribbean literature, who was the first author that impressed your mind, where you began to see yourselves in the pages of the books you were reading?
I would say early on, first I discovered I realized I loved poetry. I was drawn to it. Then I discovered Maya Angelou, of course, and then I learned about Claude McKay. And then, of course, we knew about Miss Lou because my father's mother and my father's from Highgate, and my grandmother and Miss Lou knew each other. It's like small world, right? So I always grew up, my grandmother had a book, a Miss Lou book, and then I had there was a tape or something, and I got to hear her, so that was my introduction. Or my dad would always talk about, do you know Miss Lou said this or that? And now we're in an age where the technology is such that these clips are coming up, and it's like, wow, what a treasure trove. You get to, because I didn't grow up looking at those TV programs in Jamaica, right? So I'm like, I'm encountering these things in adulthood, like, oh, wow, this is so cool,
And these writings that you read when you were growing up, would you say that you discovered, you just mentioned that, you come across these videotapes of all these old shows and whatnot as an adult, but as a young child, as a teenager, as a young soon to go to college student, how did reading these writings impact you personally? Outside of being a creative person, how did they impact you?
Oh, well, you got to see yourself, because in, Maya Angelou, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, even in high school, I discovered Wallace Thurman and Langston Hughes and all of the writers of the Harlem Renaissance. And I'm like, wow, nobody is writing about this, and like Wallace Thurman's The Blacker the Berry, a very, very important work. And I wanted people to know about this work. And I said, okay, and he was friends with Langston Hughes. And then I went down the rabbit hole of the whole Harlem Renaissance, what the scene was. And it just validated my existence as a person from a particular cultural context, dealing with certain issues that the dominant society didn't care about, didn't see. Now I only have language for this now, as a teenager, I didn't know what the language was. I was like, I like this. I just know I like this. And I want more of this. And then, later on, I discovered Octavia Butler because I love speculative fiction. And I've read everything she's written. You know, there's so many people, but it's just, it's just like, okay, there's permission there. That's the importance of what they did. They're like, okay, you have permission to do this. You don't have to do it this way, you know?
Yes. I hear the excitement that you have just in recalling those experiences of reading those authors. It's so similar to mine when I discovered or African writers like our 𝗴𝗂𝗲𝗀𝗃𝗧𝗘.
Right.
When I discovered Samuel Selvon, when I discovered Earl Lovelace, so when I discovered the same ones you spoke of, the Toni Morrisons, the Alice Walkers, all of them. When I read, and what I loved especially is how every author had such a unique voice and a unique way of writing that did not take away from who we are of people of, people of the African diaspora, because we do have a particular voice. Then I remember when we ended up reading, we call it a reggae novel, Colin Channa.
I know Colin, yes.
Yes, I was so excited. And I remember dropping him a line and said, you know what? I wish I had your book to study when I was doing literature.
Right.
Because it was so modern. And it's not that the other ones were, something taken away, but it was so exciting. It was so palpable. It was, like you said, a nice rabbit hole to go down. Do you remember? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know Colin very well, and what he did was important because there again, it's permission. We are coming out of colonialism. Everything is written about post-colonialism, and it's this very zoomed out perspective and third person, and he's like, I'm going to write romance. And I'm like, yeah, why not? And he did it very well, and excellent work.
Yes, I really enjoyed that. It made me feel like I was putting on a whole lot of clothes that suit me perfect. Beautiful first piece of poetry that you wrote and even performed out loudly.
I think I was like in 6th grade or something, and I don't remember all the details of it, but even at that age, my central character was a girl, right? Because I've always been concerned with women's issues. I always ask these questions like, why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And, so when my parents raised us, my father was always he's like very on brand Jamaican man. He's like, only the best, only the best for my daughters, right? And he's like, you could do this, and you could do that. I got that encouragement. So I remember, I was dealing with a lot of, I think I've been fascinated with the themes of women overcoming things, or women, freeing themselves. And that was showing up then in like, I was 13 or something. And, I started really, I didn't really go and read publicly until I was like a freshman in college. And I tried it, and it just, people were very warm and they liked to say, you should do some more of that, and that's how it started.
Oh, okay. You see, the reason I asked that question is because I remember when I started to write, my poetry, and I would write and I'd hide it because I felt that they were my innermost thoughts.
Okay.
I didn't want to share it. That's just too intimate. And it wasn't really intimate material, but it is the unveil. I think of it as the first communication of self. When you pour out into your words. I remember once someone asked me, why is it that when people write poetry, it is so dark? I'm like, maybe because you're only reading dark poetry.
Right. There's so many. Yes, there's funny poetry. There's all kinds of poetry.
How do you develop the skill of becoming a very good poetry writer?
Well, this is an important question because there are multiple parts. Just like anything that has locomotion, it has parts, right? And the parts do different things. So part of this process is, yes, listening to yourself, writing images, things that come to your mind. Those things are organic and unique to you as an individual, and you can't really teach that part of the process. It's like some people have to sit under a tree, some people have to be in the bathtub. I don't know. it's different for some people hear it, some people see it, they dream it, whatever. But it is a craft, and it is a tradition that's been developed for a very long time. So there are some rules and there are structures. So the next thing is, and what I tell people is, once you have the idea, what is the most potent vehicle for your idea in terms of the form? You know, what shape does it want to be? What is the, what can really bring it to life? Is it a sonnet? Is it a haiku? Is it free verse? Is it like, what, you know, what should it be? What language are you going to use? What is the, is it past, present, future? You know, what's the point of view? Whose perspective? Blah, 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 blah. So these are the stages we go through. And then, you know, you can't be too precious with every little word. The editing process. Editing is a real talent. And not only late in my career have I encountered really good editors who say, well, I don't know what you mean here, or how can you make this more clear, or how can you use less words? You know, this is the respectful exchange that should happen to make it strong. So it's like, at that point, you know, there's several factors that go into it, but it first starts with being willing to write down what's in your head. If you don't do that, you're not going to have anything.
Yes. When you've just explained, Keisha-Gaye, all the various ways in which that we can approach writing poetry and pouring out on the paper what comes and all the skill that it may take, is it necessary for one who desires to write poetry or do any kind of writing? Is it necessary for them to know and learn all the rules before they start?
I think it's important to have a grounding. I think you have to have the ability to not let that overwhelm you, though, that you know, you mustn't be too rigid. If you're a poetic kind of person, you're not rigid anyway. And you would welcome these stencils or whatever to see, like, is this what it's going to go in? Or is this gonna... Right. And you know, so then, but first you have to kind of have a sense of what you're writing. And I always say, just write it however it comes out at first, and then go back, rework it. Maybe the beginning is the end. Maybe this doesn't work. Maybe you have to do it over. But you will know when it's finished, and you will know when it feels right, if it works or not. You know? Right.
Now, this being your process of going to the point of, you know what, I think this poetry is ready. And I think that these series of poems are ready. And I have done due diligence, and my editor has gone over my work. What brings you to the table now of saying, you know what, I'm going to publish. I'm going to put them all together. I have X amount of pieces of poetry now. How do I take me to the next level? Or do you even have to ask yourself that question, or it's just a fait accompli?
Well, I think, you know, the beauty of poetry, and as you begin to publish, is that it's not frowned upon that you publish them individually in journals or whatever. Your publishers like to see that, you know, it's an endorsement that it's good, and, you know, but you don't have to do it that way. I think for me, it's like, when I have a strong statement, like a body of work that is making a strong statement, and it has a through line, and there is something that I'm trying to say in total, and all of these poems are various angles to look at that, then I feel like, okay, this could be something, you know. But I don't set out to write that way. I'm always writing something, and I go back periodically and I look at what's in there, and I say, okay, what can I go back to? What, you know, I have a manuscript of a new manuscript I sent out, and I got some notes back from a publisher, and it was very promising. And, you know, in my head, I said, these aren't really done. But the editor, of course, the editor was like, these aren't really done. I said, you know what? But I knew that when I sent it. But I think probably for me, I'm at a stage now that I've been doing this so long, I'm able to do that because I have relationships and say, hey, look at this. Right. But if you're just starting out, don't do that. Really make sure it's done. Right.
Yes.
Because at this point, I have friends that can look at things and say, okay, go back and do some more, but just polish it and make sure it's ready before you send it out.
All right. So your first piece was done in 2014, Gathering the Waters.
Mhm.
And the one writer says, Abiodun Ayowole.
Yes,
Right? I don't know if I got
Mhm.
it right.
You got it right.
And the writing is, Gathering the Waters is a potent book of poetry that can intoxicate your senses. Keisha wields her pen like a samurai swordsman. What a wonderful comment.
Well,
Tell us,
yes.
Keisha-Gaye, how you worked on your first publication. And I am taking that Gathering the Waters was your first bit. Is that correct?
Well, I'll take you back. First, I have to say Abiodun is one of the members of The Last Poets. And if you know The Last Poets, they are historic. So, you know, he was a mentor. He's, you know, back in the days, I still does it, has open houses at his place and to mentor young poets. And I used to hang out up there and have him listen to my work. So he's the first person I went to when I did this and say, hey, what do you think? So I was very honored to get that that blurb from him. But let me go back. So my first book really was self-published, and you know, I did that in like 2001, and the poems weren't bad, but you know, it was just something I needed to do because I needed to know how it was done. I didn't want to do it again, and I could have used an editor, and it was just a lot of work. But technically, I published a book before that. But then Gathering the Waters, yes, this was published by a small press. And, you know, I just wanted to delve into this conversation about lineage, what we carry, what is useful, what is not useful. And gathering the waters is, you know, it's physically impossible to gather water, but, you know, we're magical. So all the water has got to come together and wash away things we don't need, and then water and nourish things that we do need, because there's things that we are calling culture, which are just obviously remnants of the enslavement experience. And I feel like people who are alive now in our generation, it is our responsibility to purge that. We got to get rid of some things we just shouldn't be doing. And we need to build our self-esteem. We need to let go of some things and nourish some other things. And those are the conversations in that book. You know?
Yes. Do you happen to have that book nearby where you could grab one piece that, you know, exemplifies what you just spoke of? Because I think I think it's a very critical piece of information you just shared about the responsibility we have now as grown folk to tweak and change and leave certain things behind and let go of. But the lines are so blurred, we're not able to distinguish, you know, between the good and the not good for us.
Well, we're hard-headed because we're very stubborn. We don't want to let go of some things because we identify with it. Like, you know, a lot of, sometimes even the way we discipline children and things, I think is like a bit excessive, but people will disagree with me. I don't care. Anyway, this is the book.
Yes.
Okay. And the poem that I usually read from here is called I Am the Caribbean. So this is sort of real like the signature central piece. And I could share it. Would you like me to share that poem?
Please,
okay. Okay. This poem is called I Am the Caribbean. In the belly of a ship named for supposed nobility, I came this way. From low-caste Bombay to Chinese-built railway, I came this way. From Irish town here pours the one back there, I came this way. I became that jigsaw piece floating on the archipelago. Too enmeshed to go beyond the gravity of my being, I am the Caribbean. A sweltering pool of disjointed life, each day shaping, remaking itself into an electric rhythm, skipping from bata to tassa to nyabingi, weaving through me, making me that kumina sound, that pan melody, that flute in the hills, that shack that brings back that sound of conviction, of personhood fought for, the independent ardor that we bled to see. I came to be that diasporic medley, calling me down to ride through this life, changing shape as I see fit. And though we may forget the names of spirit, we call them viscerally, from Trenchtown, Port-au-Prince, Port of Spain, concrete just the same. All repositories of potential energy and stilted memory. I am the Caribbean. So that's that one.
That feels like a nice, that feels like a whole set of royal robes right there.
Thank you.
That's how that feels. And you
Mhm.
see, for me, writing and hearing writing has got to transport that feeling, the meaning, and especially, I love the cadence and the rhythm of that.
Mhm.
I hear it. When you speak, you take me right into the middle of Spain, Trinidad. When you speak, I'm right there with every place you just named in Jamaica, Irish talk.
Mhm.
You took me there. To
Good,
me,
good.
that's powerful writing. How
Mhm.
does a poem like that come to you? I know it's been a while, but how did that poem come to you? Does it come to you in waves and sounds in the Caribbean Sea? How does it beat with your heart?
I tell you something. I personally, I dedicated this book. The dedication says for the ancestors. That's how it came. And 𝗪𝗪𝗬 𝗪𝗂𝗫 whatever. I don't care. Let me tell you, we cannot be afraid of our ancestors, okay? There's a lot of things we don't understand that's mysterious, and art is a mysterious
Indeed.
process that is very, very close to very high forces. Art, music, dancing. These
Divine.
things are, they come directly. So the part that I bring to it is two things: obedience and listening. So if I get that feeling like, I hear a phrase, or I see an image, or I think of something, I respect what's coming and I make space for it. I prioritize it. And we don't have to do these big things like, let me take the day off from work. You can go on your lunchtime and go sit on a bench in the park and write 5 sentences, but then you have to commit to go home and finish it. So that's how it came. It's just, ideas, and it just, I don't know. And I tell you, people know, I really wrote that poem in one sitting. It was just, I just wrote it one day, and people, that's like one of the more popular pieces.
Yes.
So
it feels very together for me. It feels very filling. That's like calming pudding and sweet potato pudding and ginger beer,
right.
and red stripe beer and jerk chicken. It's so wholesome for me. And the folks who are watching right now, people like Bernard Coburn, who writes in, yes, I know he's excited right now. 𝗵𝗂𝗫 Blake, who travels widely and also writes from the feeling, is tuning in and watching. Keisha-Gaye Anderson from out of Canada. Andrine Bonner, Capo Reynolds' daughter, Christine Reynolds, is watching right now. And she's saying yes and agreeing with everything.
Good.
And I really want to break out in Jamaican, and I'm gonna say yes, fire.
That's right.
Because these are the things. These are the things that make us. When you put your battery into your battery operated devices, if there's not that spark, then that device won't work.
That's right. That's right. It's a very good analogy. Yep.
It won't work. And I believe every time I speak, especially to a Jamaican writer or any writer who is not in his or her original place of birth and they're living elsewhere, my mind immediately goes back to Claude McKay and all of his writings that he did when he was abroad. When I think of him talking about the poinsettias, warm red in warm December, blood red in warm December, and he speaks of the Spanish needles, it warms my heart, because I know back then it was even colder, because our togetherness isn't as tight as it is today because of technology and communication the way we have it.
That's very true.
So I am happy for when I meet another writer like you, carrying on the legacy of the Louise Bennetts and the Claude McKays and all other writers that we really revere. And speaking of revered writers, Olive Senior,
Mhm.
has been another celebrated writer from out of Jamaica, award-winning writer. She has endorsed one of your books as well. So tell us about
Mhm.
that book.
Oh, yes, happy to. This book is my most recent book. It's called A Spell for Living. And this is my art. I'm also a visual artist, right? So
We're not leaving tonight without talking about that.
yeah, so the book has, images and poems and things. And I met her once before, but I don't know if she remembered me, but I just asked her. I said, would you please, I know you're busy. Would you read this book? And she said, sure. So I was very, very grateful for that. I'm very honored, so.
So please pull from here. The Spell for Living received the Editor's Choice recognition for Agape Edition's 2017 Numinous Orisons or Orisons.
Mhm.
And this was a literary award for poetry. And it features your original artwork and poetry throughout the book. So Olive writes, for those who don't have that book right in front of you right now, and all of these books that Keisha is talking about, Keisha-Gaye is talking about, they are all available on her website. That is www.keishagaye.ink. So Olive writes, A Spell for Living is both indictment and exhortation, mourning and celebration, illuminating the routes to living and loving handed down by the ancestral powers, just like you just said, Keisha. And Keisha-Gaye Anderson offers us transcendental and luminous poetry in cadences, my word, as compelling as heartbeats, a book to keep and read over and over again. And in the words of our own Olive Senior, that is, to me, absolutely spellbinding, a spell for living, because I believe that's what art is supposed to do. Art is supposed to transport you from the seen to the unseen. And
Yep.
yeah, and I'll never forget at the end of Song of Solomon, when the writer wrote about the ascending of the African peoples from the earth during that last scene in that book, and I've always, ever since, been enthralled. Why name a book A Spell for Living?
Because I do believe there's many, many layers to this and many, many years of thinking and philosophy, but essentially, we have to have our own agency. We have to make our own spells. I mean, it's very simple. It's like, I even tell my children, I said, like, we mustn't talk badly about ourselves. You wouldn't talk to someone else like that. You wouldn't say that to another person. Don't say it to yourself, because these things become reality. And, it's just that we have, because of our unique experience, we have been made to like discredit anything that we create as not good enough. And and this is just from slavery and just being subservient, made to put faith in other people's things, like they have the answer. But we now have to, and there's, like, don't get me wrong, we obviously know resistance has been continuous for hundreds of years, and there's always a small group of people saying, no, we're going to keep our culture. No, we're going to do this way. But, we're fighting against a really strong force that wants us to just give up all of our power.
Yes,
So make your own spells, and it doesn't matter how, but get yourself to believe that you are worthy. That's what I'm trying to say. Get yourself somehow. I don't care how you do it. Get yourself to believe that you're worthy of love and respect, even if everything around you is saying that you're not worth it.
I appreciate this, because you say, when we have to create our own spells, it doesn't matter how. This is a very powerful legacy you're leaving.
I hope so.
So it definitely is, because these things need to be said. Because the unseen is, of course, more powerful than the seen. And as simple as, how do you relate to yourself? What are the words you're saying over yourself, your mind, your life, your product, your work? What are you saying? How are you making it celebrated?
I mean, wasn't it?
Go ahead.
wasn't it Marcus Garvey who said, you're already defeated. I'm paraphrasing, if you don't think you can do anything, like, what's the point?
So it is right that all of us in our unique ways, in our own unique voices, we document and cement. Because whenever we document and cement through writing, these thoughts, these ideas, these feelings, they do become flesh. In the beginning was the word, and the word becomes flesh. It's as simple as that. That's a spell. That in of itself is a spell. And for those persons who may not know, the spell was not first written in English. It was coming from lands far away. And if in literally every culture, you will meet these sage sayings. You have just used very plain words and said, look, a spell for living. Is there a piece that you would read for us that you either would love to go to from Spell for Living?
Well, I have a small piece in here. It's called 𝗴𝗂𝗬 and I'll read it. It's very short. 𝗴𝗂𝗬, Jamaica. Spirits on a sojourn through cracked drums, manacles, and scurvy faces, meeting guardian caciques in the land of mommy's sweet water. And she organized us all by heart, not by skin. We take the masks of race and fling them up like confetti, mix them up like rice and peas. We melt borders with our bodies to show you one love. All the currents colliding to light up the mind like lightning. This kind of unity, this kind of love is the only reality the world is fighting. That's just thank you.
Yeah, I love it. It don't have to be no long thing, something till midnight. For it to be effective, And when I sit in a poetry reading, like I am doing right now on Why I Write, when I sit in a poetry reading, that's even bigger. The reverence for me just reading the work is so awesome that I have to have a nook. It's a whole celebration for me to be able to consume this work, because it feeds my soul. It waters my soul. It lifts me to another place, because we are all creative beings. However, not everyone is purposed to create more positively and more good every step of the way. And I know that even sometimes for my own self as a creative person, I can have so much of me already. I know what is in my mind. But when I take the journey into reading a book such as yours or any of our audience members watching or listening, it does transport you. And I like that transport. In my mind, as I was prepping for tonight, Keisha-Gaye, I was thinking of a particular question to ask, and I prefaced it when we opened our show, talking about the business of imposter syndrome. But as the conversation between us unfold, I'm not sensing that you experience this. Is that true or false?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, everybody has self-doubt, right? And certainly, I've had to work on building my confidence just like anybody else. But I feel it's like when you know something in your gut and you have certain experiences of objective reality and certain things are true, you get to a point you're like, it's true. We need to heal these things in our society. Like, I've observed enough, I've seen enough. I know what I'm saying is real. And I always say, if something moves you, it's taking you to where you're supposed to go. Right? So let it move you. It's like, that's what it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to direct your attention to what you need to know. And I think that I'm very confident about the art I am creating and its value, and I think that persona may be different from we all have multiple people, may be different from a different aspect of me that maybe is not as confident. But there, I feel like it's sacred. And I'm not saying like I'm sick. I'm just saying that it's important. And I feel like there's value. And so I really honor it. And I just do it. I don't care what anybody is saying. I can take feedback. If it doesn't work, then I'll make it better.
Yes. And you definitely answered that question even earlier on, and you repeated it just now, when you talked about the business of honoring what you have been given. It may come to you as 2 words, a phrase, maybe an entire poem. You actively make space for this. And here we're speaking to someone who you have a full-blown professional life. You are a family woman.
Yep.
And I do know that you share in your community as well. So you avail yourself the time to do all your living as best as you can. That's a part of you casting a spell for your own living, of course.
Yep.
My question is there a method to your writing?
Madness? No.
That is beautiful madness, if ever there was. But what is your method to your creativity that keeps you on the ball while you have your hand in so many different pies?
Yes, I think Octavia Butler has an essay. I think it's called like Positive Obsession. I could be wrong, but I feel like I got this idea from her. But the thing is that I've been obsessed with this thing that I do, and everything in my life has to bend to it. And I've known myself since I was a teenager that like, oh, I got to break it to my parents, I'm an artist. But everything else has had to bend to that so that I could create the stability to do that. So I found ways to compromise. So I always tell people, you got to compromise. Like a house doesn't fall out of the sky. There's like a brick and then there's another brick, or there's little pieces, and it's for any kind of writing. So what I had to do, with like I had children, it's like they would come with me to all of my readings because I'm like, I can't do one thing or the other. You have to come and you can play, but this is what I'm doing right now. And I think obviously they benefited from that, right? When, with work, what I would do when they were little is I would like take them to school in the morning and I would go somewhere like a coffee shop or something. And I would give myself like 45 minutes every morning to do something. So whether I'm drawing or writing or whatever. And I've maintained that kind of like schedule because I have like hundreds of drawings. It's like, I maybe it's because I can't sit still. It's just the only time I feel soothed is when I am expressing what is the creative drive in me. If I'm not, and I'm just sitting here watching TV, I feel like that's not what I want to be doing. So my daughter always teases, she's like, why can't you just watch the show? I said, because I can hear it and I can hear the dialogue, but I'm drawing something right now.
Right.
And I'll glance up if I'm interested, but I can't help it. I'm like, I can't help it. So that's what I would say. Break your life into small segments. Then
what I'm hearing from you, Keisha-Gaye, is that you're making this your norm.
It's always been. Yeah, because it's like,
there's no two ways.
Break it up.
When you talk about your kids being small,
they're big, they're gigantic now. Like my son's really tall.
I just saw images of me taking my young son with me to the theater when I had to do productions. So he was busy running through the pews of the theater, driving everybody nuts. While we're rehearsing, while we're going through the lines, and we're in production. So it's a way of life.
Yeah.
So here we go. I hope everybody is able to see Keisha's website here on screen. Beautiful website, KeishaGaye.𝗓.
Thank you.
And here you see she has her latest book, Spell for Living. And as you see the pages flipped through, you will note that she has her own artwork there. So there are her 3 books. What about Everything is Necessary? Yes, last night at the Oscars, there's a film that won everything, so many awards, called Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, it was a good film. Yeah, I enjoyed that film.
Yeah, I enjoyed the film as well. So Everything is Necessary. Tell us about this book.
Okay, so this book here, that is me on the cover. That is my, when we first came to this country, somebody did a drawing of me on in Brooklyn somewhere on the street, and my parents kept it for me, and they framed it and I gave it to me, when I grew up. So I put it on the book. And why I called it that is because, some of the poems in here, this is a conversation, you know, I would have. I definitely talk out loud and answer myself back and all of those things, right? And I was just going through something, and I'm just like, why do I have to go through this? Like, what the hell? And I just heard everything is necessary for your growth and your development. And, you know, I felt like that was my family speaking to me like, well, this is just what you have to go through. So your choice is like, what are you going to do with this? Are you going to complain? Are you going to do something with it? So I'm doing what I do. And I put some of these poems in the book. Yeah. It's
I'm
really...
going to ask, you know, I'm going to ask you to share
oh, yes.
what your piece is.
Absolutely. There's a piece in this book that I always share, because it's sort of their answer to me. Like when I'm like, what's going on? They're like, well, everything's necessary. And then this poem came after that, and it's called Ancestors. Okay. You wanted to look into the dark, didn't you? So don't curse these eyes. We gave them to you and sent you to straighten the bends in these steel tracks that link all of our names, rusted under salt water, buried beneath bundles of cane. Sing songs into candle flame for these bones of mine that reach through you, stand you into 6 feet of woman. They have not forgotten how to brace against the lash or bend backward for the bembe. Each day we move with you. Can't you hear? We are riding the rhythm that beats these words through your center. You beg us to enter, but we never left. We is me, is you, is us, all now together since forever. We laugh and lift your sight towards starshine, seashells, sleeping poetry in every alley and pissed on corner. We tune your ears to the footfall of predators who stroke their loneliness to the bowline of your lips. You wanted to know, not believe. So see it all here and build a ladder with these visions that lift us up, one by one, hand over hand, after birth to under dirt. We listen with you, roll slowly up this mountain that needed us to tumble down, break ground, and move things. So listen here. Kill your fear, open your eyes, pull us back together, and march us home. And that is a poem called Ancestors.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Again, very fulfilling. The quickest way to get to the land of our ancestors, I would hate to say, is through the words of a crafted artist like yourself. And that's why, for me, I can't live without heart and art, you know, and to be able to be in a community of writers and thinkers, just to sit in their presence is such a, well, as you know, back in the day, in the days of old, not only in our African ancestry, artists, creatives were at the highest rung in the society. Not like now when people are being discouraged away from the arts. How are you going to make money? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do the beauty of today's world and today's life is that we're able to marry them skillfully, especially if we follow our heart's desires and our heart's passion. Joan Andrew, one of our celebrated writers, is also watching, and she says, yeah, that's right. That's how you build how you build your poetry, how you build your writing, bit by bit.
That's right. Yeah.
Your art, how do you find time to do your art, and what medium do you tend to work in, Keisha-Gaye?
Well, as I am talking to you, okay, so let me tell you, I used to always be doodling. As I'm talking to you, I'm like doodling, right? Because it's just, no, because I'm just thinking. It's like my thinking activity. So I would always be in meetings, whatever, and I would just be drawing. And it's like, I'm listening to you, I'm processing, but
yes,
this is helping me, right? Yes. And I was going through a difficult period. And so when I was a child, I used to draw, but I kind of put it down in favor of writing. That was calling me more. But I was going through a difficult period, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And I just just started. And a friend of mine said, those aren't doodles. Those are like full blown, like full blown.
Yes.
But it was helping me to cope with a lot of stress.
Yes. Yes.
So I said, you know what? Let me just, because I mean, I've worked most of my career in places where I had to commute a long time. So I would be with my sketchbook on train or whatever. And that's how that started. So then I had, over the pandemic, I made these cards, these oracle cards. So these are drawings of mine, right? So let's find one and on the back, you can see it. See?
Wow.
And I wrote messages on the back.
There is a mirror world under your feet. A wave over there breaks on a shore here. True, feel the ripple behind your eyes each morning.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the most profound things I've ever heard to start your day. That is magnificent. Wow.
Thank you. You gotta, I use that process to write these. I said, what does each of these pictures make me think about? I drew them, and honestly, I made these things, and I don't know where these drawings go. Again, it's channeling, and I know unless, people are open-minded, they're like, woo, but a lot of us are channels for lots of things. We don't even know it. So you might as well channel good things. Yes. And so I let it come, and I said, okay, I made 52 cards, and then people can take one, start your week and think about it. Mm-hmm. This one says, you were built for your journey or you wouldn't be here. Be brave, right? And you can just, hopefully this helps people. But that's what I did with the art, because it keeps pouring out. And, I had a great mentor tell me once, 𝗪𝗲𝗀, you should read her books. She's awesome. She's been doing this for a long time. And I went to a writing retreat, and she said, guys, there's not going to be this magical hour or time where you're going to get to do this unless you have money or something, unless you have someone to support you and you just go and write. But most writers have to maintain life in some other way.
Right.
And so you have to discipline yourself or it's not going to happen. You're fortunate, God bless you, if you can say, I'm going to just take a year off. And people can do it. I have children, so that's just not an option for me. I had to make my life work, and I feel like I'm better for it. There's nothing I can't do. I'm very, very disciplined, and I've endured a lot, and I still am getting this done. And it's not a race, but it's an essential act of knowing who you are. Before you leave this earth, you should know what you can do. You should know what you're made of. And nobody can stop you if you really want to do that. Even if nobody sees your stuff or you don't sell it or you don't get an award, the act of doing it is extremely important for your development and for your sanity.
It's sacred.
Yeah, that's right.
The act of doing it is sacred. Mm-hmm. Every day we live in the sacred. That's one of my mantras, one of my things to say to anyone who would listen, is that each moment truly is sacred. It's not about getting up here necessarily and walking in the park or going and sitting in a synagogue, but your moments are sacred. That's part of what you're speaking of here, as I share once more the screen that says spells for living. These are your cards. Right? And here's a website. Here's more of your art. These are your books. Oh, and especially I wanted to look at the
take a look
here. Yes. Here we go, everyone. This is some of the work, and this is what, pen and ink? Yeah,
that's it. And sometimes pastels and sometimes colored pencils and things.
Do what you need to do. This is fantastic. So if you want to learn more about Keisha, you definitely can hop on over. Let's put her name in Google, right? And I love this one in color. Look at this one. What is this one called? It just passed my eye.
Yes, we did with African Voices. I had an exhibition there, and I work with them quite a bit. I don't know where it went, but we'll be doing stuff again. I'll be involved in various things with the art, and I want to take everything to a higher level and do, what we can, but balance in all things, which is one of the sayings on one of my cards, because I always tell people, if you have children, you don't get to do that twice. So you made a decision. So now you have to be patient, because things go a little more slowly. Because I know everybody's on these 30 under 30 lists and all this stuff, but this is a lifetime activity. It's your life. So don't sacrifice your children to, you'll have time. Don't worry about it. Just do a little bit every day. You'll be okay.
And having this wonderful, rich and enriching conversation with you, Keisha-Gaye, I'm hearing a memoir coming from you.
Yes.
I'm feeling a memoir, because if we can even get to know you a little bit more, we are familiar with your work. It sounds to me like you have so much more, not only in terms of the art and the poetry, but it sounds to me like you have a journey to share with us.
Oh, there's so many stories. I have so many stories.
When are we going to see that?
Listen, well, here's the thing about the balance, right? Because energy must flow. So if I'm going to stop doing one thing, I need money to do the next thing. So we have to see how that's going to work out. But I have a very early proposal that I'm putting together for something of that nature. Might be essays. We'll see.
Yes.
But it'll get done. And I think that a lot of people, because people see these things that I'm saying and they're like, oh my God, you're so positive. I was like, do you know the muck I had to crawl through to get to the realization, right? And I know people in our culture, they're very squeamish about certain things. And, I wrote about being a rape survivor, like it's something that happened in my very early adulthood, like long, long time ago. And your family's like, why you put that out there? I said, because it could save somebody's life. And I tell you something, I used to write when I was a journalist for Honey magazine. I don't know if you remember Honey. It was like with Essence. And I wrote about, I've always been concerned with women's issues, because I just feel like there's a lot of work to do there. And I wrote about Black women in depression. And someone wrote a letter to the editor, and I have it framed somewhere, where she said that she was attempting suicide again, and she was stopped because she saw the cover of this magazine with my story in it, and she opened it and found the resources and got help. And that's the kind of that's worth more than anything to me. So I have a lot to tell you about how I arrived at these very positive realizations. There's a lot there, and it's not a victim story, it's just survival. It's just like, there's some things that need to be discussed that hopefully only if they help people. I'm not here to just chat my business.
Right. As we would say in Jamaican, out here, talk up with business, so everybody knows. But that's not it. And you see, the thing is, you've hit on a very key point that I have been working through for the last 5 years, because I think that as women of color, women's issues, there's a lot that women, you look at them, they look like they're okay. They're past 30. They have the college degrees, the money, the trips, everything. Right. But there is still something. One of the things we've been doing right here on this platform in a different format called Go Speak Women, where we do provide that platform for women to discuss some of these things that is so hidden in our culture, because part of it is shame. A lot of it is shame.
A lot of shame.
But a lot of family issues. How do you deal with someone who, has gone through different types of trauma? Your kids who have to live in this day and age where their value system is pinned on a swipe or a like or a share or a follow. So we have to keep the conversations going. And that's why we hold spaces for water rights, because everyone's story is so important. And it's just a piece of the jigsaw puzzle, because we want to see the beautiful picture at the end. Right. But it's not going to be so beautiful if one of our pieces are missing.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely a process.
It's a process, you know, and I
Yeah.
really thank you for your time. You dropped some
Mhm.
very serious, good, heavy nuggets with us on this experience of why I write. Is there anything that you want to share that you may not have yet touched on, or one final word for us to take on our journey as we go forward?
Well, I don't know. I would just say, the time passes anyway. So if you want to do something, start doing it, even little by little. And just like anything else, when you do something little by little, you will move something, and then the other thing will be in its place. So just start, don't judge yourself too much. And let's see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shuffle my card deck. I'm going to pull a card, and then I will leave you with a card, and whatever is left is the word that everybody needed to hear.
Love that. Love that.
All
Nothing
right.
happens but time or chance. I love it.
All right, here's the card. You see this card?
Yes.
Okay. It says here,
That image.
behold the beauty you are when you finally spread your wings. It's a bird. Okay. So, I have another line from a poem in the first book. It says, we belong in this world. Listen to its first songs. Made music of the simplest of things and understood that people are not commodities, but sparks of the divine set in motion to a perfect dance. And I want us to just remember that, we have to get out of this colonial mindset that has us like in this
Divided.
prison of
Divided,
thought.
separated even worse from our own best inner selves.
That's right. We don't trust ourselves. We don't think we're beautiful. We have the cognitive dissonance. It's like, well, we must not be that smart. And once you get education and you travel a little bit, which is why, we were kept out of these things, you begin to put the pieces together and say, oh, you can learn anything if people invest in you.
Oh, yeah.
But so now we have to teach ourselves. There's no excuse, right?
No excuse. I see one, again, I know that Petula so agrees with you, because she says, in traveling abroad, she found her riches, and that's what her book says. She says, in wrapping up, Keisha-Gaye, you are a wonderful spiritual teacher.
Oh, well, thank you.
Beautiful. She says, yes, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And this needs more attention, this experience of being a rape survivor. And this needs more attention. Thank you so much for being a survivor.
Thank you so much for having me and give me space to talk about it, because I want to take the shame out of these things. Things happen,
Yes.
And we have to deal with them and heal from it.
Yes. We want to touch and agree and hold each other's hands.
That's right.
We come to this world together, and understanding that even if we don't see each other, we are speaking words and we're holding space of light. Just like the Underground Railroad, we're holding channels and tunnels of light for others to walk through. And be it an image of an art, or be it words of encouragement, or words to simply explain what we're living within and how to move forward in the days ahead. Keisha-Gaye Anderson, thank you so much for being.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. You have a great one. And thank you so much, my wonderful friends, for tuning in to
Awesome.
Stay with us and continue to comment, watch, share, and like. My name is 𝗪𝗏 𝗪𝗏𝗧, signing out. Until next time.
Good night.